give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am, as always, your ghost, Brennan Klein, and with me, as usual, and always also, is your co-ghost, Tim Brayton. Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm feeling really good. If ever there was a moment where I wanted you to try to deliver that in a Crypt Keeper voice, it was that sentence.
Well, no, but see, here's the thing. The movie we're talking about is the 1971 prequel to the Henry James novella The Turn of the Screw, The Nightcomers. That's what the title of the movie is. And is it
They sure do.
They come. They do come
at night and during the day as well.
Yeah, they come whenever they can at any opportunity. But is it a horror movie? Is the question.
It is a horrible movie.
It is a. Okay. Well, yes.
I don't think so.
No.
I would say that it is conspicuously not a horror movie to a degree that makes it one of the many reasons it is hard to understand why this project exists.
Yeah.
Is that it is clearly not a horror movie.
Would you say... Okay, well, what would you say it most closely resembles? Because this is a really unique film object.
It is... Well, go ahead. You were finishing up.
Yeah, no, to me it kind of feels like it is... It occasionally remembers to try to be an erotic thriller almost, but it's also not that.
It's not that, although it is best when that is what it is being.
Absolutely.
Shall we say. And I say that not in a prurient way. I say that literally just in a, well, at least when there's naked people thrashing about on screen, at least there's some kind of personality or energy of any kind. I would say it is attempting to be Merchant Ivory's adaptation of 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so not yeah, I guess thriller is the wrong word. It is kind of this like almost gothic eroticism. It does have this like kind of heaving, weird, sweaty quality to it that then is just frequently interrupted just by British pastoral drama.
Exactly. Like if you asked me to describe the plot, and in the process of asking me to describe it, told me I could not reference any of the sex scenes. And you could describe the plot without referencing any of the sex scenes. Like they're very vigorous and, as you say, very sweaty, but they're not like plot crucial. We could get the same amount of story just by sort of understanding that these characters are having sex. If you asked me to describe the plot, I am earnestly not sure if I could. Like, I don't quite entirely know what happened, because I'm not sure that much did.
Yeah, I guess I'll take a whack at it, because someone's got to try.
Yes.
So, if you're just joining us, The Turn of the Screw, which this is a prequel to, is about a young governess whose, sexual repression leads her to believe that these two dead people who were once staff at the house where she is nannying two children, they were carrying on. She believes she's seeing their ghosts. So this is the movie where... So, okay, I was talking to Ben, my boyfriend, before I started watching this. I did not make him watch this because I'm a nice person.
And that is good. That would have been a relationship ending.
Yeah, maybe. But I was like, I don't see how this movie could be anything other than Peter Quint, the former valet of the dead father of these children, and Miss Jessel, who is their former governess. I don't see how it could be anything other than them fucking and then dying, and that's basically what it is.
That's basically what it is. And it's somehow so much less than
yeah.
Like the thing that happens in The Turn of the Screw, and we could get into the issue of like, well, is what we're seeing, the old housekeepers, like, paranoid Victorian anti-sex repression and whatnot. Basically what we learn about Jessel and Quint in the course of the turn of the screw is that they are not very nice. He is certainly not very nice. We're meant to understand that he's kind of this, like, looming, cruel, ominous figure. That's why his ghost sort of popping around, or is it his ghost, or is it just the new governess's hallucinations? On which subject I'm fairly sure that this film has a concrete answer to that question.
To no point. It's extravagantly pointless.
It's extravagantly pointless. But the movie. Well, we'll get there. Like the turn of the screw wants Quint to be this kind of gothic figure, right?
Yeah.
Like he's a kind of, he shows up, he's dark, he's handsome, he's scary. This film's Quint is not unhandsome, and he's not any of the other things. Like, he is not a dangerous presence, even though I think he almost should be, because some of those sex scenes are not kind sex scenes, but they're not staged as, like, rape scenes. So it's very
This
weird.
movie is lots of things and yet none of the things. So as Quint, we have a halfway gone to seed Marlon Brando.
It is the film he made directly before The Godfather.
Which I think makes sense, because he's starting to get that Godfather voice.
The sort of paunch, the sort of hair is starting to thin out a little bit.
But just with the thickest cartoon Irish brogue you've ever heard.
It's wild. I never got used to it.
No, it's like if Warwick Davis's Leprechaun was the lead of Wild Mountain Thyme.
It's a little bit like that. I kept thinking it feels like the reason Quint is so bad around the children, and the reason that he ends up trying to, like, possess their souls later on, is he's so mad that they just keep trying to steal his Frosted Lucky Charms.
Yeah, it's this really ridiculous character choice to hang this entire movie on. But anyway, so basically the movie acts as though he is this charismatic tyrant that we know Peter Quint to be, even though that's not the performance he's really delivering. He is basically becoming a bad influence over the eldest son, Miles, played by Christopher Ellis. Miles keeps spouting off this patently false information that Quint has been giving him. He keeps modeling his behavior after what he sees Quint doing, and as we know later on, what Quint is doing is lots of vigorously violent sex with Miss Jessel, the governess, played by Stephanie Beacham, who, I don't know if you know her from anything, but I know her as Dylan's mom from 90210.
She's in a couple Hammers.
Oh, okay, great. So she's been around.
Yes.
And then, so basically, Mrs. Gross, played by Thora Hurd, she runs around saying, "Oh, Miss Jessel, you can't go around fucking Mr. Quint." And also Flora, the sister, is there, played by an 18-year-old.
Yeah, the siblings seem to have by default swapped ages, just because it is so not remotely possible to read Flora as, if we are trying very hard, we can probably read her down to like 15 years old.
I don't know, I think...
She's post-pubescent,
I mean,
though.
okay. She's giving an orphan first kill performance, basically.
Yes.
I think she is performing as a younger child reasonably well. But she is so much taller than her brother.
She's so much taller.
Yeah. And they kind of have drowned her in these giant dresses that are, I think, meant to make her seem smaller.
They're very chaste, like lace up to her throat, trying to make her seem like an innocent little girl, but like she's 18.
Yeah.
And she's not going to stop being 18 no matter what dresses they put her in. It reminded me very much of when Florence Pugh had to play, I think, the youngest March sister as a 10-year-old in Little Women. And, like, God bless Florence Pugh for just going for it, but I didn't buy it, and I don't buy it here.
Yeah, it there's nothing to by. Like I said, her performance is good, but it's giving this weird dissonance with the character she's playing and that you know her to be.
It does not feel like she's playing a little girl. It feels like she's playing some sort of like developmentally disabled adult woman.
Yeah.
Who is acting like a little girl, or maybe just a malicious woman who's like you said, the first kill, the orphan first kill approach.
Yeah, maybe
it does not feel like she's a 10.
Yeah, actually, yeah, maybe this is an Estonian woman who has murdered Flora and replaced her.
That would get us dangerously close to having thrills and chills in this movie, and we have none of those.
Yeah, we can't be having that. And yeah, so that's the plot. I don't know. They fly a kite.
That is the plot. Yeah, they tie Miles to a kite and have him fly it like a hang glider.
That seemed really fun.
That seemed really fun, but also like that wouldn't happen.
No.
In the 1890s.
No. And it's Mrs. Gross panicking about Quint doing a lot of things that are mostly fine. And then some really vigorous sex scenes, and then we'll talk about the fallout of that. And what happens with that in a little bit, I think. But basically, I do appreciate in some ways the fact that Brando is just a big ol' weirdo, even though it's the wrong weirdo to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's this scene where he's talking to, I don't remember, I think Miss Jessel, but, Miss Jessel, I think, is telling him to, like, go talk to the master before he leaves or whatever, or maybe it's Mrs. Gross, doesn't matter. But he's plucking a chicken, sitting at a chair, and there's just this mess of feathers for, like, the 5 feet around him. And he's making a lot of choices, and it's just very peculiar, and I didn't hate watching it necessarily.
I don't think you can hate watching it because it's so, Brando's position within like acting is obviously legendary and whatnot. And he introduces this kind of like business oriented acting. There's the very famous bit with the glove in On the Waterfront that I always think of anytime I see him do anything, where he needs to keep his hands going. He needs to keep thinking like, I'm this character in this space. I'm going to be like interacting with this space. A lot of like really overemphasized naturalism. And at a certain point, and I'd always assumed it was post The Godfather, because his career basically just starts tanking hard in the early 60s. He is at a very low ebb when he gets cast in The Godfather. Like that's part of why he got cast in The Godfather was he kind of came cheap. And this, again, is the movie made right before that. So this is kind of like the bottom of the trough before he swoops back up as Don Corleone. So I had always assumed it was like a post-Godfather, I am now king of the world, I can do whatever I want sort of gesture that he becomes the uncontrollable weird fucker who, like, ruins the shoots of Apocalypse Now and Island of Dr. Moreau. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing that here. Like, this feels like the seedling of the Dr. Moreau performance, where it's just like Brando's doing his thing, and you construct a movie around that as best you can, and that kind of becomes even more pronounced, I think, because of an individual whose attachment to this project is almost as weird as Brando's, really, who we haven't talked about, which is director Michael Winner. Mm-hmm. Apparently Michael Winner, from start to finish on this shoot, his thing was like, oh my god, I get to direct Marlon Brando? And you can feel that level of Brando's not getting notes. Mm-hmm. You can tell, right?
Yeah. And Michael Winner, most people know him from Death Wish. I know him from Scream for Help, which is a movie that asks, what if The Stepfather looked like a TV movie but was scripted like a porno?
What if X was scripted like a porno does feel to be the Michael Winner experience in my limited viewing history.
Yeah, so I don't know that he... I think Marlon Brando has to be the peak of talent that he acquired. I don't think, Charles Bronson is kind of rubbing up against that too much.
No. I think he worked with Burt Lancaster once, so that would be maybe the other argument. Okay. But no, I mean, Brando certainly was a gravitational force even in 71. So, like, Winner is not equipped to deal with an actor like Brando. I don't think Winner is frankly equipped to make movies at all. I've never I've never walked out of a Michael Winter film being like, well, that was a good experience.
Yeah.
Terribly much.
Yeah, I feel that.
Certainly not the Death Wishes, which I find tedious when they are not being actively unpleasant.
Which is kind of, I mean, I guess the Nightcomers is better than that. It mainly levels out at tedious. I don't know if it's ever unpleasant.
I don't think it's ever unpleasant, and it is routinely strange, which the Death Wishes are not strange.
Yeah. Okay, actually, so this would have been before Death Wish also, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I don't have that year in front of me. Yeah, I don't. It doesn't make sense where any of this is coming from.
I mean, it's all so strangely conceived and executed that it almost does not become... It's almost not worth the effort it takes to be like, why would you make a prequel to The Turn of the Screw? It's like, well, why indeed? But having made the decision to make a prequel to Turn of the Screw, why would you make this prequel to The Turn of the Screw? That becomes the much more, like, urgent question to me.
Yeah. Because that is the weird thing about the Nightcomers is it does exist in this weird limbo space where it obviously can't exist without Turn of the Screw in the way that it is right now. But it also can't exist with it. It does not square with Turn of the Screw, both on the level of just that I know a lot of people are frustrated by the idea that because the Turn of the Screw is very much about the ambiguity of what happened or not. And then obviously a prequel stating exactly what happened is not what most people who love Turn of the Screw would want. But there's also the fact that it does not fit with Turn of the Screw because, like, Miles is there when the new governess shows up at the end of the movie in a weird sequel tease.
Right.
And that's not what happens in Turn of the Screw.
That is not what happens in Turn of the Screw. He is not there.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And, yeah. And it's like... It cannot be overstated, I think, because it is such a conspicuous flaw. The beauty of Turn of the Screw, since it was published, this has been the party line. Everyone knows this. This is not an obscure reading. The beauty is that we don't know whether the kids are sweet little innocents who are being taken over by ghosts, or if the kids are shitty little sociopaths because of their background, their rich upbringing, they're being corrupted by these dead servants. We don't know. This is unambiguously a movie in which the kids are nasty little monsters who have become that way because they keep spying on Quint and Jessel having sex. That's it. That's the movie. That's who these characters are now. There are no ghosts.
No, that's true. But also then they do a weird kind of voodoo ritual at the end also.
Oh my god. Oh my! So there's like a slight motif of voodoo dolls. We see a couple of voodoo dolls earlier in the movie. But then there's this weird, like, plasticine pond sequence where which one gets mad at the other one? Is it that Flora gets mad at Miles for making the ducks wrong?
Yeah, Flora gets mad at Miles.
And like she smashes it, but that doesn't mean anything because it's like all about the ducks, and we get a close up of these plasticine ducks having been smashed.
But no, but then don't
like,
they also burn the plasticine dolls of Jessel and Quint in like this weird?
I think
bowls?
they do. I think they do, but that's after at least Jessel's already dead, if I recall correctly.
But is that
is that consigning their spirits to walk Bly House? I don't know.
I feel like it's maybe meant to be imply that it is. I don't know. It does. I don't know, Tim. I have no answers about the Nightcomers.
It's baffling. It's a baffling movie. There's so many whys that I have attached to this movie, Brennan.
Yeah. But I think okay, so I think where it shines is as this weird erotic gothic about two kids being corrupted by just this fucking weirdo. And then there's this weird stuff that does feel like it's trying to conjure up that atmosphere, but only intermittently. Like there's this weird connection between the idea of like sexual depravity and this kind of like consumptive illness because Quint does have this cough, and he's just kind of it seems like, and there's this kind of recurring motif of the idea that if he doesn't he needs to have sex and find a mate before he dies. That's implied by this story about a butterfly that is being told.
Yes.
And then there's this wonderfully hilarious shot where the kids are play acting sex, and Mrs. Gross walks in on them and asks what they're doing, and they say, "We're doing sex." And then it cuts to their parents' coffins.
I had to stop the film. I was getting overloaded with stimuli, and I was like, that is an invalid cut. If one of my editing students was like, look at this scene transition, I'd be like, there isn't a scene transition. You go back. You fix that. You fix that or you're getting a D. And I will say the line, "we're doing sex," is funny. I liked it. It made me laugh, and I think it was supposed to make me laugh. I think that was the goal. But yeah, no, that was a just truly, truly strange moment. And I don't want to push back so much as agree with you that is what the movie ought to be doing. But I think that to say even that it is presenting Quint's sex as depraved, which in a sense I feel like it's supposed to be, because I truly do think there's a really big question. Is Jessel doing this because she wants it and she thinks it's good, or is she doing this because she's kind of under his sway and letting him tie her up and flick her nipples and all these things he's doing? The nipple flicking scene is also fascinating to me in terms of how weirdly meaty it gets when Brando's just kind of like squeezing her boob like a tangelo, just trying to get a sense of is this ripe or not.
Yeah. He's
really
kneading dough.
It's not sexy. It's bizarrely not sexy. But I think that is sort of what this is supposed to be about. Quint is this corrupting influence. Quint has these very peculiar and particular sexual tastes, whatnot. The camera loves Brando so much. Winner is just giving this movie to Brando, gift wrapped on a silver plate. Brando is underplaying the character. He's not playing Quint as a brooding Heathcliffian menace. He's playing this kind of sad Irish dreamer thing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even come across as the depraved sex maniac is corrupting everyone around him. It almost is he just wants to have some sweet, sweet lovin' before his cough kills him, or whatever the hell's going on.
Okay, well, so here's the thing. Any scene where he's not having sex, he is playing this wide-eyed innocent.
Exactly.
Who's wandering around looking at ducks or whatever. But the sex scenes, I think, don't square with that, or at least so the story that the sex scenes are telling, it feels a lot more like what the Quint of the story actually is and was meant to be, because especially the first time he shows up, there's the sense that Miss Jessel does not want to be having sex with him. He is hog-tying her and having sex with her, and then that act has broken her boundary and now she's into it.
Which is kind of the 50 Shades.
Yeah, that's the 50 Shades of it, and that's also the buttoned up 19th century sexuality of women aren't allowed to want to have sex, so they have to be corrupted. And so that's the narrative that those scenes are telling, and I feel the way that he acts in the sex scenes, maybe it's just because it's so fucking weird and not resembling human behavior, that is when he gets closest to playing the Quint that he's supposed to be.
Yes, I agree with that.
But
it's also the sex scene. Well, that's what's weird about the sex scenes. They feel so excerptable.
Yes.
They're not part of the movie in a
No,
way.
they're not. But I just feel in the that is true, and in that being true, I think that they don't tie into the character that you see on the screen of him being this kind person either. It doesn't feel like. So the Marlon Brando we see talking and behaving and walking around Bly Manor, he is the one who is this kind of dreamer who's actually in love with Miss Jessel and is kind of shy about it. But then when he's fucking Miss Jessel, he does transform.
Yes, I agree with that. And there are other moments where they're trying to set up this, like, he is a dangerous, strange menace. One of the very first things we see him do, which is another just really oddly executed scene, he amuses himself, but by sort of traumatizing the children.
Oh, yeah.
By putting a cigar in the mouth of a frog, which I don't think this would work. Maybe not. I've never tried doing it. It makes the frog explode, and we see the frog start to swell like a big old balloon, because presumably that's what we're actually looking at, and then it explodes off camera. So fuck you. If you're gonna blow up a frog in your movie, blow up your frog on camera. That's a rule. But it's also this weird, like, what sort of sicko would blow up frogs and then, like, force the children to watch, and then the children are very clearly, like, freaking out about it later on. But even in that moment, Brando's not playing the character as, like, nascent serial killer torturing animals. He's playing the character as this kind of, like, weird, quiet figure who's just doing this as a kind of lark in a weird way.
Yeah.
It's just strange. It's such a strange performance. It's just, the performance destabilizes so much of this movie.
It really does. I wonder, I desperately want to know what he was going for. Like, what he thought this character was and what he was trying to bring to life, because it just doesn't make any sense. I think the way that when the sex starts to permeate the film, and especially when it begins to, like, corrupt Miles, that gets really, really sleazy in an interesting way.
Agreed. It totally does.
Because then he starts modeling himself after Quint's sexual behavior and, like, tying up his sister and, like, trying to kiss her back. And it is... I actually don't know if it's better or worse that actress was 18, because that child was still a child.
I mean, that is part of why they cast an 18-year-old actress, was apparently specifically to, like, offset that feeling creepy.
Yeah.
Which...
Didn't...
And again, to me, I can't square the circle of how old these children are supposed to be.
Yeah. And, like, I think as far as what happened on set, I think it's probably better that she was an adult. So, like, they weren't doing that to an actual child, but it's fucking creepy. And that is accomplishing something.
It's accomplishing something, but I don't know. It's just one more of the, like, marbles in the bag that this movie has, jostling against all the other marbles. It does not feel like it adds up to anything. I mean, the most concrete thing it does is pin down what this film interprets the meaning of the turning of the screw to be, which is that the kids are wicked little nasty incestuous beasts.
Yeah.
Not that they have to be, like, taken over by ghosts to become that. And that's primarily what I get out of that material, honestly.
Yeah. No, I guess if there's a story, then that's what's happening in the story. It's just there's so much other stuff that we can't even talk about, because it's just like people wandering around the house and just fucking around in the garden and eating prunes and cheese. Disgusting. There's like
a whole prune eating scene. And, like, the punchline to a scene is Miles being like, well, fine, I'll have more prunes.
It is deeply mysterious. And I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this movie.
I clearly don't either. So let us take a step back.
Okay, thank you.
Because to me, this merely adds levels of mystery. It does not solve any. But I want to get your take on this. We've been talking almost exclusively about the plot, the script, some of the acting, which is a ton to talk about. Brando has made that so. What did you think about the actual film craft on display in this film? Because that, to me, makes things harder to parse rather than easier.
I mean,
but I want to sort of get your sense, just how it was made.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I love the edit that cuts to the parents' coffins.
It's great stuff.
There are several edits like that. There is also that weird boob grab scene we were talking about. Cuts to Miles sitting straight up in bed with his arms out like a Superman. So there's this really clunky editing, but there's also this kind of hazy British countryside vibe that is at least, it is sleepy but kind of pleasant, and not like actively beautiful as an aesthetic film object, but it does have this almost strange coziness to it.
And that's exactly what I was hoping you were going to get at. That is exactly the read I have on it as well. It is a 19th century period drama. It is not a terribly costly one. So it is not, it's not like the most prestigious looking fancy costume drama you've ever seen. But I mean, you're sort of already getting a leg up if you're shooting in the UK because so many buildings there are that.
Yeah.
And like it's every theater company in the country has like 10 trillion old fashioned costumes that you can rifle through. So like it looks like a period film. It looks, I compared it to Merchant Ivory earlier. That was not an idle comparison. It looks cheaper than a Merchant Ivory film, but that's the vibe. BBC Jane Austen adaptation is the vibe.
Very much.
And we have that giving this kind of pleasant, soft, pastoral, gentle, soft focused look, lots and lots of scenes at like golden hour and such. Why is that part of this movie? Like what is that aesthetic doing with this story? Which is, again, a sort of, our options are really either gothic chiller about a sexual sadist corrupting everyone around him, or sad Irish worker man trying to express his love inarticulately to the woman who works in the house. Like, why? Why does it look the way it looks?
I feel like the aesthetic best services Marlon Brando's performance as Quint, which is the worst thing to be serviced in order to make this movie a coherent whole. Because when you see him wandering around, it is just kind of like a travelogue of just him fucking around on Bly Manor. And that is the thing that is most outside of the story that this movie is telling, and the thing that everybody else is doing.
100%.
And I don't think it could have been on purpose, because I think Marlon Brando just brought that on set, and presumably the look of the film was planned beforehand.
Well, that's a presumption that I don't know if it's fair to make. I don't believe that I trust Michael Winner to be that kind of thoughtful filmmaker.
Maybe he just brought tripod and was like, all right, what are we doing today?
I mean, that seems likely to have produced Death Wish 3, so why isn't it likely to have produced this?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it is weirdly both very like competent in its sort of solid British way, and also very dull. Like, it's sort of only pleasant to look at. There's not really any, as you say, it's not actively beautiful. It's not atmospheric, which is just something I assumed would be there. I certainly assumed it would be more of a horror story than it turns out to be, but even taking away that it's not a horror with a capital H film, I still expected there to be some sort of like broody. Again, I called him Heathcliffian earlier, like some sort of Wuthering Heights-esque. Even in the absence of real horror, there's still like a sense of kind of glowering old building atmosphere, and I got none of that.
Yeah, or like swooning melodrama.
Swooning melodrama. It does not feel like Michael Winner cares very much about the ability of images to tell a story. He's really just kind of shoving us around this house and the gardens around it and hoping for the best.
Yeah, no, that seems very much like exactly what's happening. And I guess that's the thing. Like, Michael Winner was not the voice to unify all the different things that are going on within the screenplay itself, and then within the different ways that people are attaching themselves to elements of that screenplay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And he did not have a vision to fit all of these things within it. They all just kind of float around, freewheeling in zero gravity.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not a movie that comes together. It's just a whole bunch of ideas, some very striking ideas, some very like alarming ideas in some ways. Like those BDSM sex scenes, they stand out. You're not gonna forget them. You're not gonna not notice them. This is a weirdly aggressive, kinky movie when it is trying to be, and like that's fucking weird for a period piece that's a prequel to the Turn of the Screw.
Yeah, and that doesn't start for about 40 minutes either.
Also that. Yeah, we shouldn't oversell the sexiness. I think they have sex 3 times. Does that sound right?
That sounds right, yeah. Well, the boob grab scene is like separate from any other sexual contact, and then there's the like hog tying scene, and then they have sex again. Yeah, in an attic maybe.
I think it was in an attic.
Yeah, and then the kids do their sex game.
The kids do sex.
They don't actually have sex with each other.
No. But they say that they're doing sex,
they're playing
which is just a good
sex.
Phrase. I like that phrase. They're playing.
So what 3.5? 3.25.
Sounds good. I like that. So it's not like this is some sort of awesomely dirty Skinamax type thriller. Like there's not actually that much sex in it. It is also it's 96 minutes long. Jesus Christ, they were long minutes.
It is interminable.
It is shockingly slow.
Well, it's because nothing happens.
Because nothing happens,
and it's not atmospheric. So there's nothing to hook you.
No, you're just kind of sitting there, hoping that eventually Brando stops talking, so we can stop hearing his accent.
Like, so my father was drinking at a bar.
I like that you think that's what Irish accents sound like.
That's what Marlon Brando's Irish accent sounds like.
I mean, it's kind of like an Irish vampire, but I like it.
I famously cannot do accents, so I feel like that was pretty good for me.
Okay, I will let it pass. Except insofar as I have already not let it pass. But yeah, just weird movie, lots of little teeny pieces that are just kind of floating around, never connecting to each other. It does not feel like it's building up to any sort of final anything. I mean, eventually it lands at the first scene of the Turn of the Screw.
Really haphazardly, too, because that's not an ending to a movie.
No, absolutely not. It's not an ending. It just kind of... It gets to the point you made earlier. This is a nonsense piece if you don't know that it's a prequel to the Turn of the Screw, but it never really announces itself as a prequel to the Turn of the Screw. And it doesn't really do anything to set up the Turn of the Screw, except it's then like at the end, it's like, you recognize this scene, right? Pretend that's Deborah Carr. And it's like, that's it. That's the movie.
Yeah, that was deeply peculiar. Because, I mean, there are a lot of prequels that end on an implication of the first scene of the original movie. But this doesn't so much... So that's usually a stinger of some kind after the story has ended. This is just the next scene in the story and then it's over. Because there's no, like, concrete finale to this story.
No, just that they're dead. And their bodies are drifting around in the pond.
Yeah, because it's not even like a Flora and Miles will return in...
No. Although on the subject of them being dead and their bodies are floating around in the pond, we must talk about the scene, which in a film rich with scene contenders for like strangest scene, because again it's basically just scenes. Like there's not like a movie in this movie. It's just like shots and moments. The scene where Quint pulls Jessel's body out of the pond, I think is possibly the goofiest scene in this film. And I have 2 reasons for that. One is, I don't think that's a prop doll. I think that's actually Stephanie Beacham, like, feigning rigor mortis, and Brando's trying to like manhandle her around out of the pond while she's just like kind of standing there with like her arms clasped against her chest.
That sounds right.
And it's goofy as shit, and she's only about 90% good at it, so her arms like keep twitching a little bit while Brando's like trying to just swing her around like he's dancing with a broom or something. And then there's a moment when he lays her down on the grass, and he's like, Brando's pulling out all the stops. He's weeping, he's wailing, he's bawling, his Irish brogue is all snotty and whatnot. And as he lays her down, so the scene starts with Stephanie Beacham's eyes closed. When he sets her on the grass, her eyes pop open. Has got to be a choice that they made collectively on set.
Or, again, Michael Winner maybe was eating Fritos behind the camera and did not notice.
Did not notice. But she pops her eyes open. She's dead. But she opens her eyes. Which is potentially something, right? Like, potentially if we want to start feeding in the paranormal interpretation of Turn of the Screw that this movie has been not interested in, maybe we can do that. But when she opens her eyes, Stephanie Beacham is staring cross-eyed, and it fucking looks like Harpo Marx just like wandered in to complete that one shot as her body double. It's such a goofy expression. Like, it's not just that she's looking cross-eyed. It's like she opens her eyes really wide, and she's like bugging out her eyes while she's looking cross-eyed, and it's the goofiest fucking thing, and it's right at whatever this movie has as an emotional climax is literally this exact specific shot, and that's what we get, and it's like, what is this movie? Like, why any of this movie?
Yeah, it and you reminded me of her dying. Also reminded me of the scene that almost immediately follows that, which is Marlon Brando getting shot in the head with an arrow.
Yes.
It's so random.
So Miles shoots him in the side, and then Brando's like flopping all around, clutching his chest where he just got shot by an arrow. And then Miles is like, I don't remember what he says. He says like some sort of like weird calming
thing. It's like,
thing.
Well, now you can be with Miss Jessel or something.
That's it. And then shoots him right in the goddamn top of his skull.
It's
from like 2 feet away with an arrow.
Yeah, it is kind of brutal, and it's a decent effect. It's not super bloody, but it's just an arrow sticking out of Marlon Brando's
just arrow
Irish
sticking
head,
out the top of his head. And I also really love the shot with the arrow because it's one of the places that really just completely shows off Brando's thinning hair. And much as this movie is trying very hard and failing to convince us that Flora is a child, I think it's trying to make us believe that Quint is like a man in the fullness of his age, like his sort of adulthood. He's very virile. He's very
hale and hearty and at his sexual prime.
Brando has clearly at this point rounded the corner to a slumpy middle age.
Yeah, he's not only got the thinning hair. It's also the hair he has is long and stringy and kind of disgusting.
It is terrible hair, and I do not know if it was supposed to be terrible hair, or if it was supposed to be like Byronic locks.
I think that
but
too. But the movie also
it missed.
It's not hiding the male pattern baldness we are seeing. It is very prominently displayed in many scenes. Mm-hmm. But again, we're not making aesthetic choices in the Nightcomers.
No, we're just like, I mean, again, so much of this film can clearly be answered by saying, well, Michael Winner just was in awe of Marlon Brando, and it kind of shut down his ability to direct a movie. Like
whatever modicum of that existed in the first place.
Which, given the rest of his filmography, I assume was a pretty small modicum, yes.
Yeah, that's the fucking Nightcomers, bro.
I I'm in awe of it. I would never try to talk someone down from seeing it, whether from morbid curiosity or I think that's the only way. I don't think there's any such thing as non-morbid curiosity to see the Nightcomers. It is, I'll put it this way. I had a certain set of expectations for how I was going to be annoyed by this movie, and that is not how I was annoyed by this movie.
Yeah, and to paraphrase, well, actually something you said earlier and something I said in my Letterboxd review, like, this movie is weird, which is different from bad.
Yes.
It is also boring, which is bad.
Which is the same
yes.
as bad. Yes.
So it's like a black and white cookie. Like, depending on which side of that, which of those is more important to you, maybe don't watch it. But yeah, it's unexpected. So The Nightcomers was not a movie I had heard about before doing research into Turn of the Screw derived films. And this is the one that we chose because it's the one that is less exactly like The Innocents and thus just a worse version of The Innocents, which is boring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there is, for as anyone, like presumably most of the people listening, who enjoys discovering a film, this is certainly one of those, like, you're not going to really run into anyone on the street who has seen or heard of The Nightcomers, and it's kind of fun to wander into a movie not really having any sense of what it could possibly be, and then it turns out to be this discomforting and strange and bizarre. And I like living in a world where you can wander around a corner and The Nightcomers is there.
I feel like that is a threatening world where children dare not go out at night, and I don't want to be part of it.
Fair enough.
But I do take your point, and I feel like we've somewhat spoiled that effect on our listeners by telling them what they can expect. But no, it's a ungainly mess. It is a strange, wrong object.
Yeah, and any other final thoughts on The Nightcomers that we need to squeeze out?
I comfortably feel that I do not have anything else to say about The Nightcomers.
Great. Well, speaking of ungainly messes, potentially next month, as requested by Patreon member Harold Bleacher, we are going to be discussing Antichrist / Son of the Devil movies.
Right.
And Tim, so keep an eye out on Patreon for the poll for that film, for what we're going to talk about in the first episode of November. But Tim and I have already discussed this a tiny bit. We don't have our full slate yet as of recording, but we are neither including Rosemary's Baby nor The Omen. So we're going to get into some weird shit on this month that I'm kind of excited about.
It's gonna be a time.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that, and happy Halloween to all who celebrate. Ooh. And yeah, you can find all of our other shit on alternateending.com. Follow me at It's Raining Brents on Twitter, and that'll you'll get about one tweet every 3 days, and you'll love it, I promise. And yeah, bye.
Bye, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, that.